We have an expert panel here. I will introduce my speakers in a second for about 1 hour, and then we will have a city panel, kindly inviting our city representatives to come and exchange experiences. And now I will start introducing my speakers. Welcome, and thank you for being with us here. We have Luis Puerto, who is Market Development Director from the European Institute of Technologies for Mobility. Welcome. We have Cristina Odiadesca, Deputy Minister of Environment and Physical Planning from the Republic of North Macedonia. Thank you for coming here to Barcelona to be with us. Mike Nieuwenhuizen, I pronounced it correctly. Welcome, Director of Urban Planning, Environment and Health Initiative at ICE Global. And last but not least, Sarah El-Sharawi, Editor-at-Large of the Arab Media and Society. She's climate communication and politics of energy transition expert in Egypt. So thank you very much. We tried to make this discussion broad from different angles. So the aim is to explain a little bit what are the challenges, from which angles do we need to understand urban transitions. And I would start with Luis. Maybe we heard this already before, but the Mediterranean region shows one of the fastest urbanization rates and in the world, and facing a lot of challenges, not only climate related, but also migration, to mention only one. And currently 60% of the Mediterranean region's population is estimated to live in cities. So which are the common trends and challenges in the Mediterranean region as far as urban mobility is concerned?
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation. I work, just a general context, I work for an entity that is investing in urban mobility innovation to accelerate the transition, the urban transition. So from our perspective, from the mobility perspective, indeed, climate change is the strongest mega trend in the background. The fact that transport accounts for 20%, road transport roughly accounts for 20% of CO2 emissions. That's something that drives the policies and the innovation that we're supporting behind. So shifting to public transportation, active mobility, and electric shared mobility is the priority regarding this. And the other main aspect of impacting cities, especially in the Mediterranean area, because the heat island effect is even stronger and getting stronger in our area, is of course the contribution of road asphalt to the heat island effect. So another important consequence of this is to repurpose urban spaces, less gray, more green in terms of ground asphalt. So we need to take away, possibly in the future, we can elaborate on this, but on-street parking, for instance, is something that we need to get rid of. And then, of course, this has an impact on cities because many revenues from the city come from the parking, and we need to change the financial model for cities behind so that they can still keep the income and invest it in public transport, but in the right allocation. So, reinforcing the use of cars, electric cars, and so on. So, yeah, very roughly, that's.
Thank you. We get to our next topic, right? As we said before, how to communicate with the citizens in this sense, and why is climate communication so important? And I'll turn to Sarah. Climate communication or climate change communication, a field of environmental communication, science communication. It is about the causes, nature, and effects of anthropogenic climate change. But why is this so important, and why are there so many hurdles?
Thank you so much. It's really a privilege to be here with the esteemed panelists. you know, climate communication is a very, very broad topic, and the strategies and ways of approaching it vary widely according to context, of course. But there are sort of, so we can talk about it, you know, in terms of, you know, information sharing and climate literacy angles, and then also from a research perspective, you know, it's important to understand public perceptions and public understanding of anthropogenic climate change. But for the purposes of today, I want to sort of highlight three sort of key areas that are particularly important. The first is providing citizens, this is something that was actually sort of touched on already in the introductory panel, but providing citizens with information to ensure their health and safety, particularly as we're you know, seeing increasing numbers of extreme weather events. The second thing is galvanizing support for implementation of transition, adaptation, and mitigation efforts, and then also you know, communicating and understanding policy priorities. And this is something that was mentioned again also, is the criticality of including the public in these discussions about developing policy and how important it is for it to be an interactive process. And so communication is a big part of that. When it comes to hurdles, there are so many. I was trying to think of which to specifically pull up. I'm just going to sort of list them here, and then maybe we can discuss them in more detail as you see fit. But among them, climate mis and disinformation, public perception challenges, so knowledge gaps or lack of trust. Mark actually mentioned that in the question that he raised. Properly adapting to communication to context, and this also relates to resource issues, insufficient resources, and lack of training, which is certainly an issue that from my particular context, and absence of data, which is another really big one, issues of representation or lack of representation of certain communities, particularly more vulnerable communities, and then communication and framing failures. So it's not enough just to communicate these issues or communicate policy, but you know, if it's communicated ineffectively, a policy can be sort of dead in the water before it's moved forward at all. So these are some of the hurdles, and we can continue as you say.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, and I'm getting to Mark because his provocative question beforehand was to the point, and yeah, you said people are saying, yeah, I don't believe in climate change, but they do believe that polluted air is affecting their health, right? So how can you bring citizens to join forces, cities to join forces and work towards sustainable and healthy urban environments?
Thanks so much. It wasn't supposed to be provocative, my question. It was just something that interests me because I hear a lot about this. I'm coming myself from a public health point of view. I mean, I do a lot of studies. What are the health impacts of urban transport planning in cities on health? And I think, you know, for a lot of people, for the climate change conversation, it's a bit further away from them, and you know, it has some negative connotations, and also it's polemic. I mean, and in this way, perhaps we need to move away a little bit from that and develop a narrative that is closer to people. And I think myself, I can see health being in there as one of the themes that may be quite important to convince people. We have big health challenges in our cities. I mean, we know many cities are hotspots of air pollution. I mean, we have, you know, the levels are much higher than elsewhere. I mean, in a city like Barcelona, for example, the air pollution levels are well above what we need for guidelines. Also, we know that we have more than 1,000 deaths, premature deaths each year as a result of the air pollution levels. We did a study in 1,000 cities in Europe, and we see more than 200,000 deaths per year, premature deaths, because of the air pollution levels. So we need to address that. At the same time, You know, when you look at, for example, cities, often we don't have enough green space, and we know green space is extremely important for people's mental health. We have a lot of mental health problems in cities. Some, you know, there are other reasons as well, but it's also because we're missing green space. Even when you look at green space, it relaxes your brain, it's good. I mean, it's the kind of things you need. Also, cities tend to be very noisy. Noise is not very good for us. I mean, often you hear the argument from, you get used to it, you know, that it's fine. Actually, it's not. I mean, you know, it causes a lot of problems, hypertension, premature death as well. And then as what we mentioned also, the big driver for us is climate change. And what we see in particular also in cities, that are always 4 or 5 degrees hotter than surrounding areas, so the urban heat island effect. And also, we know there are quite a lot of deaths related to urban heat island effects. We estimated that around 4% of deaths in our 1,000 cities is related to the urban heat island effects. Not to talk about heat waves, it's just the effect of having the heat. I mean, so you need to look, I think, you know, you need to bring that home, that we have these problems that affects people directly. But then also when you think about solutions, climate action, you can actually address many of these challenges. I think what I see personally is that our cities are too car dominated. Even, you know, when you look around, even that the car is often not the major mode of transport. I mean, it's often people walk or cycle, but because cars take up so much space, it looks like that everyone is using a car, and it isn't. I mean, that it takes up a lot of space in a city like Barcelona, although only 1 out of 4 trips is by car, it takes up 60% of public space. We can use that space in a much better way. Imagine we have all these roads, lots of asphalt, and you put more trees. I mean, you get more green space, you know, you get more cooling effects. You get a much more livable city, and I think that's what we need to go to. And this kind of livable city is also much better for health. And I think many times what we see in the Mediterranean cities are actually that they're very dense, and that's good. Unfortunately, the car has taken over the city. I mean, we should use this density to make people walk and cycle with more green space, with some cooling in that. And I think that's kind of the vision we need to sell to our citizens, to buy into our stories. I mean, to get away from the climate story, what is often far, but to much more for your health and livability as a narrative, that you're going to get a better future also for your children, because we know that, you know, our current cities have a large impact on children as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we come to planning and planning cities, right? And planning, special planning. So we were yesterday at a field trip and learned about the super blocks of Barcelona. This was very insightful how they try to.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great example where this was a very busy road before, with a high air pollution levels, a lot of noise, no green space. To at once you get a street, and no one, when people walk there, they can't believe that it changed, and this only changed since May. And I think we need many more of this kind of pedestrianized streets in our cities to make it nice, healthy and livable. And it's also good for the retailers, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. I'll turn to Christina. Welcome again. Spatial planning, urban planning. There are many measures, many important initiatives or actions here, like implementing renewable energy sources, as we heard, or providing green infrastructure, securing the land against floods and sea storms on the coastline, ensuring sustainable land use and housing. Which climate change issues from spatial planning perspective are related to urban transition in your view?
Thank you. I'm really glad that I'm here today on this panel, and I would like to share some my thoughts and experiences that I have. I would like to introduce myself in the beginning. I'm Deputy Minister for Environment and Physical Planning from North Macedonia, and I have 13 years of experience in spatial planning agency in North Macedonia and PhD degree in environmental engineering. So a little bit politics in the past few years, and the rest was science. in the beginning, I would like to make a comparison between the climate change and the COVID that we experienced several years ago. I think that if we don't prepare ourselves for the climate changes, our reaction to the catastrophe from the climate change would be as same as the house that we have in the COVID crisis. That's why we need to prepare ourselves, first of all, in the strategic visions and the laws, and after that on land, so we can see the changes afterwards. The measures that we are taking to climate resilience, we are doing that for our well-being. So I would like to say that our local carbon future and the process of green transition are highly dependent on the spatial planning and after that the urban planning vision. From one side, the climate changes affect the space on the regional and as well on local level. And the answer to the vulnerability of the space to the climate change is the same on local and on regional or national level. And also the measures that should help us to the localities and the regions to strengthen the resilience to climate change or extreme events should be correlated on spatial and urban level. I would like to address that drought, flooding, heat waves are three important points from the climate changes. When we have drought, we have reduced water supply and we have consequences in the agriculture. That's why from spatial planning perspective, some lands start not to be, the agriculture is not that very important, so some farmers are going in the cities, to live in the cities. And when we have reduced water supply, we must take measures to have good water management on local level. When we have flooding, affected areas are housing, infrastructure, and agriculture again. Here I would like to point out that green economy concept is very important. Why? Because if we invest in good infrastructure in the beginning, when the flood is coming, the consequences wouldn't be so big, and the money that we are investing in sanation of the consequences, we could invest them in preventive manner in the beginning, in good housing, in good infrastructure, etc. So I think that smart investments and green economic concept is very important. Heat waves that I have mentioned are touching the public health, the tourism sector as well. So they are raising some health issues and maybe solving some problems on health problems on local level. I think that we should, if we want to combat the climate change and make us resilient to make our cities and countries resilient to the climate change, we should focus first of all on the emissions that in our countries that we are that they are initiating climate change, and as well to adapt ourselves on the consequences.
Thank you very much. So what do you think to open it, and if someone from the audience wants to pose a question, just feel free. So what do you think in the Mediterranean region, what are the common challenges? What are things that you could exchange, you could share We talked about the narratives. Which narratives could suit to the Mediterranean region? Say, okay, we need to bring those to the communities and to the public.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think that the communication between all involved stakeholders is really important, and everyone should do their job. Politicians should force the policy. The administration should implement the laws. The non-governmental organizations should raise the questions about climate change issues and environment. And I think that to me as a politicians, we should make we should relax the circumstances, so the citizens should see the green solution as cheaper and better solution, not so they can accept this green transition period more easily.
I think you need to pick something what is close to people as well. And I think, when it comes to climate change, you see that, like what we saw this summer, we had a super hot summer, and the Mediterranean is heating up more, and that's what people feel. So that's what you need to make use of to, make changes. I mean, that's what people are directly affected by. So we need to make changes, and I'm thinking there also for what you see is from an urban planning perspective is that we're still sprawling. A couple of weeks ago I was at the workshop by one of the projects that I'm leading, and Europe is the continent where most of the sprawl is taking place. What surprised me to a lot, I thought in Europe we're doing well, we're actually not. We're always building a little bit more. What means that if we build a little bit more is that people need to drive to where they want to be, because often there's no public transport put in. So they end up driving more, leading up to more emissions. We know sprawl is more emissions, and then you get this whole circle that leads to climate overheating and this kind of things. So we need to make sure that we go dense again, because that's the most sustainable way of living actually for most of us. I mean, and also make sure that people are not dependent on the car to drive, but then we put in good public transport or put in cycling lanes. I mean, too many cities don't have cycling lanes. People need to feel secure to cycle, or that people can live closer to the work so they can walk or cycle to the work, I think. And that's what we need to look at. I like the idea of the 15-minute city. How you implement it, it's not easy, but I think it's one way forward. But all your destinations within a 15-minute journey for that. We also have to remember, you're mentioning that it's cheaper for people. You have to remember that having a car, using a car is very expensive. People don't realize it's 20-25% of their income actually they spend on the car. A lot of policies at the moment force people to buy a car because there is no alternative. So people can save money by using public transport. People can save money actually living closer to their work if their work could come closer to them. Often what we see in metropolitan areas, that people live in the outskirts, the work is in the center. Why not move work to the outskirts, to other areas that people actually can live close to their work? And I think that's one of the big problems I often see, that they want their people together. But if I look at a metropolitan area like here in Barcelona, it's still that too many jobs are right in Barcelona, and the surrounding areas don't have the jobs. It's where people live, so it forces people to commute. Why not put a lot of offices outside, around, and so people don't have to.
Or enable remote work, right?
Or remote work, yeah, no, it's, I like to go into work, so that's why I like the social contact, so I don't always promote remote working, but of course it's one of the things.
There's a dark side to remote.
Yeah, but you can combine, you don't need to work only from home or go every day to work, so this is
There has been a dark side on remote working, because it has been an incentive to live farther away. You only need to commute 3 or 2 days per week to the city center, then you choose a house in the countryside, and maybe you save CO2 emissions a couple of days, but then the days you go, you don't have public transport, you have to drive, and then you spend a lot more. So in the end, it's a zero-sum game. So perhaps at the end, it's very difficult to predict also these effects. Of course, the pandemic was difficult to predict. But I think the key aspect for this change is how to help people give up cars, because there is no incentive, not even for the cities that make a lot of money, revenues on parking, taxes, fines. A city like Barcelona makes 150 million on revenues from cars, all those aspects. And of course, I mean, if cars are eliminated, then where this income will come from? So the financial model needs to change also for the cities in order to keep the revenues and then earmark them to cycle lanes, better public transport, more dense cities, not so urban sprawl. So, but the key aspect is how to convince the end user that in the end the car has to pay and cannot use so much public space and change the model, the financial model.
Also, if I may, yeah, I think from a communication standpoint, I think one of the things, I mean, at least from within the context of Egypt, and I think that this is, I mean, Egypt is having a particularly difficult economic crisis over the last several years. There's quite a bit of destabilization in the region in general, and so it ceases to be a priority in a lot of from the perspective of a lot of the public. And then on top of it, the issue of, and I think we sort of touched on this a little bit, but the issue of climate change is this huge amorphous concept that on the one hand has become sort of controversial, and on the other hand is just overwhelming and makes people feel helpless. So I think the idea, which you sort of touched on, Mark, of making it, sort of dividing it, making it less, making it less of this sort of unattainable or scary concept for the public, to make people feel more able to actually make sort of change on an individual level. I did want to mention one thing quickly, which is that the moving away from the narrative or shifting the narrative of climate change. One of the things, this is in journalism, it's an idea in journalism, is to not have climate journalism be a thing anymore, and just call it journalism, because climate change is affecting every aspect, and it's going to affect every aspect of our lives moving forward.
I like that, and I also like what Christina said. Everyone should do their job, right? So the politicians should look for policies. I once heard a representative from Munich city that they said, okay, we don't need these co-creation things and involving citizens in providing public transport, right? For providing electric public transport, achievable and cheap tickets, and people, if they see that it's easy and it's quicker to take the bus, then they will take the bus and leave the car, or not even have one.
Yeah, I think also one point related to yours is that too often I see in cities that there are these silos, that you have urban planning, you have transport planning, you have environment, you have education, you have health, and they don't talk to each other. I mean, and so they need to develop a common, strategy that everything fits together. I mean, I just give the example, for example, education. Unfortunately, too many kids are being taken to school by car. The education sector can do something about this. This is very important. We know that air pollution has a very strong effect on the brain of kids. I mean, that it's slower development, also they don't get enough physical activity. And so these are the kind of things where also the education sector needs to be involved in finding the solution, but often they're not thought about that these are part of what we need to do. No, for the mobility, it's left up to the transport department. Unfortunately, most time in the transport department, these are transport engineers educated 30 years ago on what is transport planning. Transport planning for them is getting people as fast as possible from A to B, and not thinking about, is this the healthiest way of getting people from A to B? And I think, you know, you see in the later and in the last few years when you go to transport planning courses, they take into account sustainable transport, health, etc. But a lot of the previous generation, they're not educated that way, and I think we need to bring that in. Just to mention as well, from a health perspective, we know that most people don't get enough physical activity to a healthy life. It leads to premature mortality, it leads to diseases, to overweight, to diabetes, you know, mental health problems. We have a lot of problems. People often don't have enough time to do physical activity, and that's why I always suggest, you know, trying to build in physical activity in your daily life by, for example, cycling to work, walking to work, even if it's only a little part of it. I mean, take public transport, walk to the public transport stop, and then you build in a little bit, because otherwise what you do is end up going from home, step in your car, sit at your work the whole day, come back home, watch TV, and you don't get any physical activity. So most people don't have enough time to go to the gym, so make it part of your daily life. But we need to develop cities in that way that people can do this, I think, and that's very important.
Thank you. I would like to add something. You mentioned an interesting point that every part is seen by itself, like urbanism, transport, energy, water supply, etc. That's why I think that spatial planning is so important, because it includes all parts in the spatial plan as a document, as a strategy or a vision where we want our nation or region to go. So I think that the greatest mistakes that we are doing today when we are planning on urban level, we usually don't take into account the environmental conditions, like the air is polluted, or if we have a lot of citizens, the number of the city, if we build a building here, will raise the number of the citizens that are living here. We'll make a mess on the street when they're taking to job, they're going to job, and etc. I think that environmental aspects are usually taken aside. And I would like to share one really important point for our country. We are working now on a spatial plan, spatial planning strategy, and we have made a new methodology for spatial planning, and as well a new methodology for incorporating the climate changes in every aspect of the spatial planning process. So I expect that our new spatial plan will be climate sensitive. So, thank you.
Yeah, no, that's very important, I think, and there you've got a big role for spatial planning. A few years ago we worked with the Catalan government, and also for spatial planning, they have very descriptive ways of doing, or prescriptive ways of doing things, a lot of indicators or whatever. But to our surprise, there were no indicators related to health. And they wanted to have some health indicators in there. And so we worked together with them to put also some health indicators into the whole process, because often, you know, these kind of things are ticking boxes. You need to do this. There are lots of requirements, how you use space, with housing or whatever. But then we also put in 10 indicators that could have a positive health impact. And I think also for climate I have now, and I think it's important to have these indicators. Where do you want to go? What is the outcome what you have as part of this package, so that urban planners, spatial planners also can make sure they have health. And it's very simple things, like we said, you know, you need to have public transport stops within 300 meters, or some green space of at least 1 hectare within 300 meters, or a cycling lane within blah blah blah. Very obvious things, but they were not in the plan as such. I mean that.
So actually, the part on the sort of planning the city around it, and this is not my area, but planning the city around it and also encouraging things like cycling. I mean, in Egypt, there's the Cairo is not set up at all for cycling, and there's not really a culture of cycling. So there was a period of promotion of, you know, the idea of promoting cycling, but you know, it's not much of the city's not set up for it, and also it's not a common practice. So considering the environment and the social and cultural conditions, of course, is very important. The discussion about silos also made me wonder, because one of the things that I mentioned in the hurdles is the issue of failures in communication. So or failures in, for example, policy communication. And this is sort of a question, but also a thought that perhaps the fact that different sectors are operating in silos is actually contributing to some of these communication failures. So, for example, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about the framing of a carbon tax. This is actually, I'm putting my Canadian hat on for a second. But the concept, I mean, there's been so much resistance in Canada to the concept of a carbon tax, and a lot of analysts have been attributing it simply to the fact that it's been framed as a tax, as opposed to integrated in a more, I guess, proactive or positive way into the public discourse.
Just to add, I mean, I'm very obsessed with the financial aspect of the grey economy versus the green economy, but it is absolutely true, the perception of people being this a tax, and this is also because the way it's organized is that there is a big bucket of money that which is, and then at the discretion of the politician in place every time to spend it on whatever is a priority at that time, which is provides a lot of flexibility, but for the end user doesn't help to understand that their money will be spent on more cycling lanes. So when money is earmarked for a specific policy, then people tend to accept it more, because I can pay a tax to enter into the city center as a congestion charge, because I know that this money is going to spend on public transportation and on cycling lanes. And this is an excellent example of this is what's being organized in London. So Transport for London is an agency that collects the money and spends it specifically on transport, on sustainable transport. So the public has accepted a very high congestion charge per day, like 8 or 12 pounds already, because they know that this is going to reinforce the tube, the cycle lanes, and so on. And this is a key aspect. I mean, for me, the obsession to change the green economy and the overwhelming presence of cars is by convincing people that they have to give it up, and there is zero incentive today to do that. So the example of Transport for London is, for me, it's one of the best.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you say for this kind of money flows where it goes, because I mean, if I take the example of air pollution, you know, we could reduce air pollution by certain measures, but who is actually paying for that is not always getting the benefits. I mean, that we know that, for example, what we see is that air pollution is causing a lot of primary care visits. So here in Spain, CAPS, where they are, or hospital visits. I mean, we could actually reduce the hospital visits quite considerably if we lower air pollution levels. But you know, the people that pay for the healthcare is not the same organization as that pay for, you know, getting cleaner cars or something. And so I think this kind of disconnect, who's paying, who is profiting from this. But I think at the same time you could use this argument for citizens normally saying, from, you know, at the moment it's particularly if you have national healthcare system, it's very difficult to go to your doctor to go visit or to get a hospital visit. I mean, a lot of hospitals have long queues. Now imagine if you reduce the air pollution levels, a lot of people with health problems won't need to go and visit the hospitals. But you don't hear that argument so much. I mean, it's the same for employers. I mean, we know that people living in higher air pollution areas have more leave of absence from work. I mean, because they get ill, they can't go to work. I mean, but you don't hear this kind of narrative often, and you know, it's more important that you bring this narrative. You know, if you reduce air pollution levels, you have, you know, people are more productive. They spend more time at work in that way. It's the same what we know for for example, how you get to work. I mean, people that cycle to work are more productive than people that get in the car, because often they get so stressed sitting in the car. They've been sitting for half an hour in a traffic jam, then need to start working, so they take 1 hour to relax before. So it's this kind of things that are often not taken into account, and what we should emphasize more.
Thank you. I would like to switch a little bit the discussion, because the Mediterranean region is a desired region for tourists and for tourism, right? And during summer seasons, you don't have to deal only with your citizens, but also with thousands, maybe millions of tourists. And how can this be solved, or how can shifts can be, how can tourists be also taken, responsible for their.
That's a super question. We have been working with the city of Heraklion, for instance, in Crete, which multiplies, I mean, like many other destinations in that area, multiplies by 4 or 5 its population during summertime, and of course they need to protect the city center and so on, and it's difficult to plan for 3 months or 4 months. From this perspective, it's a real challenge for the local authority. But in terms of innovation, this is our specialty again, supporting new innovations to transform urban mobility. A very good tool for that is demand responsive transport, for instance. Because for a smaller amount of money, transport can be provided on demand. So we don't need to build an additional line during the summertime, because there will be more demand and so on. And then, of course, having a contract for 3 months is very difficult for a local authority. It needs to be a long-term contract, authorization for a bus company, for instance. So how to do that? It's difficult. The planning, the contractual framework, and delivering just the piece of transport that is needed for a specific period of time. So there are new innovations in this, like demand response to transport, where citizens will ask for through an app for the bus to come, and a smaller size bus that will only come when there is demand. And this is possible to plan. Now there are very interesting tools to that. It's being deployed in many cities or regions, or even rural areas where transport is not present because it's not cost effective. So this is the kind of tools that innovation can bring in to resolve these challenges.
Flexible.
Yeah, flexible, less money, same level of service. So innovation can do a lot of this.
Yeah, I think tourism generally it's beneficial to cities. I mean, it brings in money. I mean, many Mediterranean cities, tourism is an important part, so we need to remember that. I mean, the question how much is enough, of course. I mean, what kind of tourism you actually want. I mean, and so these are some of the questions that are raised. Now, also many Mediterranean cities are port cities. Unfortunately, still the ports are not always as clean as they should be in terms from ships, etc. Including, for example, cruise ships. Like here in Barcelona, we have a problem. Barcelona is a popular area for cruise ships, so we see a lot of people flying in, what causes emissions, then going onto the cruise ship. Cruise ships are not clean enough into a harbor. I mean, they've just been moved, but you know, it causes. We know that in Barcelona, I think about around 10% of the air pollution is coming from the port, not only from cruise ships, but others as well. So, in particular, these things, these ships, you need to make cleaner to start with. But then also what we see is that, you know, when the tourists come off the boats, they just walk around for an hour or two and then take up a lot of space and then disappear and don't spend their money. So then is the question, you know, do you want to have this tourist, or you rather keep them on the boat and ship them off somewhere else? I mean, and I guess that's still on the discussion what to do with them. But I think there's impacts on our environment that are important to consider. That I don't have the answer. I mean, you give some things you could do, but I think they're an important source of potential use of public space, pollution, etc. But there are benefits of them coming as well.
Can I add something? Yeah, I would like to add something about the air pollution and the polluted cities and tourism. I think that when people are going in great natural areas which have clean air and which have clean waters and no waste around the touristic capacity, the price of the touristic capacity is higher. So we are paying the clean air in some way and clean water and the good conditions that we have there. On the other side, in the cities, we have a great polluters. So they need to pay the price because they are polluting the air from the other side. So that's why polluters must to pay for polluting the environment. That's one comparison which is very, very interesting to me. It's not for free. They need to pay. And regarding the tourism, I think we should avoid massive tourism and we should start investing in four-season tourism. So, for example, in North Macedonia, lake tourism is pretty developed, and we should invest to use that city by the lake during the other seasons. And also, we should support local products. We should support ecotourism, so the citizens which are living near the protected areas or near the places that are interesting for visitors could have their could use their products for their need and the needs of the visitors. That's why I think one interesting thing is very important, that the climate changes, I think, will also affect on which height we are going to build the touristic capacity for the winters, because the climate changes is also affecting the level of the snow falling, at which height we'll have, or will we going to have snow during the winter. So from urbanistic aspect, the climate changes are really important in the tourism, in the aspect of building new capacities.
We have 5 minutes to have closing remark. When you go home or in your country, and what is the first thing that you think there we need to start, or where there we need to follow up, or there this is what is characteristic to my city, to my country. There we should do more.
Sure, I can start. One of the things that really, again, from a communication perspective, one of the things that has really stood out to me is the need to meet people where they are. So I was teaching a climate communication course at the American University in Cairo, and a lot of the students were either, so the two things, so a lot of the students were either so stressed and overwhelmed by the things that they're living through that it was almost too much to sort of engage with issues of climate change. And then the other thing is I asked them, okay, where do you get your science news? Where do you get your environmental or climate news? And not surprisingly, they all say social media, right? So I think finding strategies to communicate these issues on like per context, on a level that promotes or pushes away from feelings of overwhelm or helplessness, to show individual steps that people can take to improve their local environment. There's been so much discussion about air pollution. It's a huge problem, especially in Cairo. A big part of it is from burning trash. There are not, I mean, this is a huge, municipal issue and complex issue, and there are projects currently underway for solid waste management. But again, there is a very important communication aspect of that, to promote behavioral change. So really just, working on communication measures, and also building capacity among communicators. There's really an absence, there's almost no local training with respect to climate environmental communication and journalism. So building capacity, and then meeting people where they are.
Thank you.
Well, for me, I mean, the main takeaways is that to change the model. I mean, we have like a wheel spinning in one direction, and we need actually to make it spin to reverse. And to do that, we need to start with earmarking. I think revenues in the right way. We were talking about that the polluter must pay in tourism, and that's absolutely true. I mean, in terms of cleaning, security, and transport as well. So that's an effect that needs to be covered. And actually, there are tourist taxes already in many cities. But many times these tourist taxes are spent on promotion of tourism. So it's actually not compensating the externalities, but accelerating them. So we need to earmark in the right way, and of course regarding the rebalancing the use of cars and all its externalities, start with things like having a deadline to end on-street parking, for instance, and dedicate that, repurpose that space for cycle lanes, green spaces, more trees, more green in general, like Mark stated. That can be a way to start, and then, of course, look for other sources of revenue. There's lots of potential sources of revenue. Like, we didn't talk about employers, but employers provide parking for free as a benefit to the employees. There are some cities in the UK, already Birmingham is charging for that on companies. They can offer it, but they will need to pay for all the parking spaces they offer. So they get some taxes that then can be used to.
So some solutions can really be simple, just making this shift and thinking
be creative in repurposing and remodeling
and
the
bold
finance.
and brave, right? And let's just start it. Also maybe experiment and try it, and see what happens.
Well, first of all, when I'll go home, I will share my great experience from this session and my experience from Barcelona, which I am visiting first time, and I'm very happy about it. I have to share this with you. Second of all, when it comes to work, we have developed a strategy for climate changes, and now we have a climate change law which is in governmental procedure. So I'll give my best to adopt that law as soon as possible. And the other thing which is very important to me, the spatial plan with climate change aspects to be finished as soon. So the plans on urbanistic level could respect all the states that are put in the spatial plan. Because when you are developing urbanistic plans on urbanistic level, you should follow up the spatial planning directions. So I think that should be very fast. And one other important thing which I would like to point out, that protection of the environment is pretty serious, because whatever you do in every aspect, the consequences are on the environment. In the building sector, in the urbanism, or in the transport sector, or maybe in agriculture sectors, every other sector, the consequences are on the environment. And that's why I think that if we want to have a good conditions for living, the environment should be closely connected with the spatial and urban planning. Because it is about the quality of life. If we have a good environment, we have good quality of life, which is raising if we don't building on every step. So I think that spatial and urban planning are closely connected to the quality of life and the environmental conditions that we are all seeking to be good for us in the future. So that would be it. Thank you.
I think what is critical is to have a good narrative or narratives. You know, that's because climate actions can be quite unpopular, and there can be we see a backlash. You know, even simple things like a 15-minute city, what came from Carlos Moreno, what's implemented in Paris. There's a backlash because of conspiracy, etc. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it, but where does it come from? I mean, and why is this happening? And I think you need to have a good narrative, for everyone that people can buy into, and also where you explain why you're doing things. It's not, climate action to pester people, to take their cars away, to pester them, or to have them pay more. No, it's because of a reason. And we need to keep in mind people like stories, they like good stories. So we need to have this kind of narrative, what is happening. Also, we need to be making sure that it's inclusive, that everyone is involved. I just would like to remind you that in most cities, we see a 10 years difference in life expectancy between different neighborhoods. I mean, it's quite consistent with many cities where you get the poor neighborhoods, the rich neighborhoods, 10 years difference easily. And we need to bridge that, because there are many other factors related to that, and we need to make sure that what we do works for everyone, and probably that the ones that have a bit more money actually pay for a little bit more. We often talk about taking the car away from people. Actually, the poorest people don't have a car because they don't have the money to spend on it. But they still need to have transport. They still need to go to their work. I mean, it's in particular for those people, it's very important that they have access to their work. I mean, that they can step on whatever, the train or the bus or cycle to actually earn a living, I think. And we need to remember that as well. That's a very important aspect of it.
Thank you. It's very important, and let me be the last statement, that our transitions are also just transitions, right? Thank you very much for this excellent panel, and it was really a pleasure to meet you all. I know that Sarah is leaving afterwards, so have a safe trip back. Yeah, it was an honor having you here. Thank you.
Thanks.